Star Trek reveals a terrible fate Voyager avoided. Star Trek Voyager had some bizarre storylines, and Star Trek Lower Decks' final season shows a fate that the crew of the USS Voyager could easily have experienced. Every season of Star Trek, Voyager had at least one story that felt like it was something out of a fever dream, and while that wasn't unique to Voyager, it was the show that delved deep into the bag of weirdness more often than other franchise projects. Although Star Trek Lower Decks has its fair share of unusual goings-on, the fact it's essentially a canonical Star Trek parody gives it more leeway. With more members of the Star Trek Voyager cast starting to return in other franchise projects, the show has been returning to the public eye recently. For example, Kate Mulgrew coming back as Admiral Janeway as part of the Star Trek Prodigy cast was a huge moment for Voyager fans, as was Tim Russ's brief Tuvok cameo as part of the Star Trek Picard Season 3 cast. Outside Voyager, the characters have experienced slightly less otherworldly adventures, but Star Trek Lower Decks includes a poignant reminder of the sorts of things Janeway's crew went through back in the day. The Intrepid-class ship in the Nanite Blob at the end of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, Episode 3, The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel, could be easily mistaken for the USS Voyager at first glance. Voyager is by far the most famous Intrepid-class starship, so it can't be a coincidence that Lower Decks chose the category of ship to be found in a scenario that could easily have formed the basis of an episode of Star Trek Voyager. Captain Janeway and her crew often ran into apparent threats that turned out to be something far less deadly, which is the plot of The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel and what the microscopic USS Endeavour is going through. Janeway's ship being pulled into another universe where everything is much larger would be a perfect fit for a Star Trek Voyager script, but Lower Decks pays tribute by giving the mini-arc to Captain Tersel, Gillian Bigman, and her tiny crew. There isn't much known about Tersel's ship, other than the nature of the universe from which it arrived. In short, the Endeavour's reality is much smaller than Star Trek's Prime Universe, and an almost identical version of Starfleet seems to exist. Captain Tersel's mission to get her crew home in the face of all the weirdness brings to mind Janeway's task as well, as Mulgrew's character wasn't short of strange challenges of her own. The most prominent Star Trek Voyager story that would classify as weird is when Captain Janeway and Tom Paris, Robert Duncan McNeil, evolve into salamander-like creatures and procreate in Season 2, Episode 15, Threshold. However, an ongoing war with aliens from a fluidic dimension, Species 8472, and Harry Kim, Garrett Wang, and Naomi Wildman, Scarlet Pomers, being replacements from a duplicated Voyager, are also among Star Trek Voyager's most off-the-wall yet compelling storylines that Star Trek Lower Decks has paid homage to. In the vast tapestry of science fiction, few shows have captured the imagination quite like Star Trek Voyager. Premiering in 1995, the show followed Captain Catherine Janeway and her diverse crew as they struggled to return home after being stranded 70,000 light-years away in the Delta Quadrant. For 7 seasons, Voyager explored not just the mysteries of space, but the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. Through all their trials and tribulations, Voyager miraculously avoided a terrible fate that could have befallen the starship, one rooted deep in the darker realities of space exploration and Starfleet's ethical challenges. But what if things had gone differently? What grim fate did Voyager narrowly sidestep, thanks to its crew's strong moral compass, their adherence to Federation principles, and the guidance of Captain Janeway? In the vast and hostile Delta Quadrant, there were countless threats that could have spelled doom for the crew, but one fate stands out as particularly insidious, becoming pawns of Starfleet's darker side, a fate defined by deception, manipulation, and moral compromise. The Section 31 nightmare, one of the most terrifying possibilities Voyager avoided, was the intervention of Section 31, Starfleet's secretive Black Ops organization. Known for its ruthless methods and disregard for the ethical standards of the Federation, Section 31 has been an undercurrent of darkness in Star Trek's vision of the future. While it appeared in later series like Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Discovery, the possibility that Section 31 could have reached out to Voyager during its journey through the Delta Quadrant is chilling to consider. Had Section 31 discovered Voyager's predicament, They might have viewed the stranded starship as the perfect vessel for their morally dubious schemes. With no direct oversight from Starfleet Command and virtually no contact with the Alpha Quadrant, Voyager was isolated, vulnerable, and desperate. Section 31 could have provided resources, information, and a quicker route home, but in exchange, Janeway and her crew would have been forced to carry out covert missions, perhaps even conducting experiments or establishing alliances with unsavory alien species for Section 31. Again, imagine Captain Janeway, initially pragmatic and willing to make tough decisions for the good of her crew, being drawn into this moral quagmire. Would she have been able to hold firm to the Federation's ideals, or would the weight of survival push her into compromising her values? Section 31 might have manipulated Janeway by presenting morally gray choices, such as exchanging technology with a hostile alien race in order to shave years off their journey. Over time, Janeway and her crew could have been drawn into a cycle of ethical compromise that transformed Voyager from a symbol of Federation hope into an instrument of shadowy control. The moral slide of the Equinox, another terrible fate Voyager avoided, was the slide into ethical compromise that befell the crew of the USS Equinox. This parallel narrative served as a cautionary tale of what could have happened to Voyager had its crew chosen the darker path. In the episode Equinox, Voyager encounters the titular Starfleet vessel, which had also been stranded in the Delta Quadrant. However, unlike Janeway's crew, the Equinox had resorted to exploiting alien lifeforms to power their warp drive, sacrificing their moral integrity in their desperate bid to get home. The stark contrast between the two captains, Janeway and Captain Ransom, illustrated how easily even the most well-intentioned Starfleet officers could lose their way. Ransom and his crew's moral decay was gradual but inevitable, driven by desperation, fear, and the overwhelming sense of isolation. They believed that the ends justified the means, even if it meant committing atrocities. Had Voyager faced even greater hardships, such as dwindling supplies, more frequent hostile encounters, or internal strife, it's possible that Janeway might have been tempted to make similar choices. But thanks to her strong leadership, unwavering commitment to Federation principles, and the loyalty of her crew, Voyager never succumbed to this dark fate. The Equinox storyline serves as a reminder of the precariousness of Voyager's situation. The crew was constantly faced with difficult moral choices, but they never let desperation override their ethical obligations. In the darkest of times, Janeway's crew held on to their humanity, refusing to exploit others or compromise their values for the sake of expediency. They avoided the slippery slope that consumed the Equinox crew, reinforcing the idea that, even in the far reaches of space, integrity matters. Borg assimilation and identity loss, perhaps the most existential threat Voyager avoided, was assimilation by the Borg. Encountering the Borg collective was one of the most harrowing experiences for the crew, and for good reason. The Borg were a relentless, hive-minded force that absorbed entire civilizations, stripping individuals of their identity and free will. Voyager had multiple close encounters with the Borg, from the thrilling escape in Scorpion to their uneasy alliance in the face of species 8472. Assimilation represents a loss not just of freedom, but of individuality, which stands in direct opposition to the values of Starfleet. The crew of Voyager prided themselves on their diversity: humans, Vulcans, Bajorans, and even a liberated Borg drone, 7 of 9, working together. Had Voyager fallen to the Borg, not only would their mission have ended, but everything that made the crew unique would have been wiped away.